Situated at the northmost point of Ulthuan lies Nagarythe, led by the vengeful Alith Anar, who inherited the realm after the defection of the Witch King Malekith. Serving on the front lines, Nagarythe has seen increased challenge in the form of new DLC factions and Ulthuan's now shaky diplomacy. At first glance, Nagarythe's abilities seem absurdly broken, but they are kept in check by limited opportunity to lever them to full effect. Welcome to Elven Plot Armor, and this is the Faction Mastery Guide for Nagarythe. To rate the faction, we are going to assess them across 5 key criteria, give them a rating out of 5 stars in those criteria, and then result in an overall rating. This guide is based on personal experiences in tandem with community feedback and playtesting to provide a balanced perspective. Starting off with strategy rating, which is the faction's ability to traverse and manipulate the campaign map. And Nagarythe have one of the strongest campaign manipulations out of all the High Elves. Starting with faction bonuses, an additional 10% to movement of all armies is huge, and -1 recruitment time is also massive, especially in the late game. Nagarythe have complicated geographic and diplomatic factors, but they deal with it by being able to manipulate their forces so well on the map, and this is typically due to the stances at their disposal. They get raiding stance, which isn't really that useful, it's a bit of cash, but more important is their signature ability. Literally the most obnoxious Skaven ability falls right in your lap. Stalking Stance. Instead of instigating a regular battle, it starts off with the chance to roll an ambush with your success versus their defense, and if they fail, it turns into an ambush for easy pickings, and this allows all the benefits of a standard ambush, meaning the ambusher can use reinforcements and the ambushee cannot, making this essentially an even more overpowered version of Lightning Strike. Even after CA has toned this down, it is still absurdly strong and does amazing in auto-resolve. And there isn't too much to say on this, but I must reiterate that all Nagarythe lords, even confederated ones, can use this, and I simply can't overstate how powerful this is, and against maybe a late game artillery army that High Elves would struggle against, you can simply ambush them and melt away these units before they even get the chance to deploy. The next stance is Underway Stance, which is only really useful in the early stages and the late stages, and boys, useful when you can use it. You can sneak behind Mrathi's capital and cripple her at the beginning of the game. See my guide in the description on how to do this, but what you will find is later in the campaign there aren't that many opportunities to use this. This is most useful in mountainous terrain, which is basically behind the Dark Elves you'll be fighting, and down in the Badlands in the southeast, which you really won't be going unless you're trying to paint the map well after a long campaign victory. But either way, it is a nice and very strong ability. It's just maybe not quite as crazy overpowered as you think it would be. A faction's leader often has skills and abilities that will contribute towards the strategy score, and Alith Anar himself is no exception to this. On the battlefield, he's an excellent Lord Sniper, and he reduces the upkeep for 50% of all shadow units, which we will cover under military. He also has several ambush buffs which assist the success of Stalking Stance, meaning late game Skaven are the only remote challenge to successful ambushes. When leveling up Alith Anar, he's like most combat lords and pretty much autopilot in the early stages with some personal flavour thrown in at the end. First up, get Lightning Strike. Now, I know what you're thinking. You have Stalking Stance, you don't need to use Lightning Strike, but trust me, if you're playing on Legendary, one time it does save you, you'll be so glad you did. And then put 3 points in Bowmaster, because running out of arrows is pretty much the only thing that can undo you. Once you get to level 12, his personal tree is very strong. Sworn to Vengeance will instantly boost profits when slaying Dark Elves, then spend points to boost his Shadow units' ambush chance before unlocking Shadow King, which grants a global +4 public order to every province, and being stretched as thin as you are, this is amazing. Get Renegade last after you've confederated the last legendary lord, or once you have Ulthuan under control, because 12% missile damage faction-wide is incredible, but having High Elves attack you while you're on holiday isn't so great, so make sure you've got control of your diplomatic situation before you blindly invest here. After this, complete the blue tree, opting for Quartermaster or Elvish Healing depending whether you like cost reduction or healing, and get Feared and Renowned for even more campaign movement. If absolutely set and never missing an ambush, Ancient Cunning will increase your ambush success chance by 30%, although remember, you do have Lightning Strike to fall back on if an ambush does fail. Further along the red line, Favourable Winds is absolutely essential in keeping your Shadow Walkers and Warriors relevant well past the mid game. Then spend the rest of your points on bow damage or anything else you fancy. As for Rites, Alith Anar gets the usual 3: Invocation of Isha to avoid attrition, Asuryan to help stabilize your unstable empire, and Invocation of Vol to prevent you ever needing a bolt thrower. His specialty is the Invocation of Moraheg, allowing you to hire an assassin once every 20 turns to take out one of 3 targets, which refresh every 20 turns or once all the targets are cleared. Now the rewards for these can be immense, so make sure you check that you're going after a target that will reward you accordingly, because some will give you excellent high elf relations and influence to help you fast track confederations and help get the heat of civil war off you. Just remember, each of these assassins can cost 300 gold per turn, so it might cost you a bit in the early campaign, just be aware of it. But overall, for having so much control over his armies, the campaign map, as well as additional tools to gain influence, Alith Anar tallies up at a staggering 4 3/4 stars for strategy. Next we have the geography rating, which assesses the defensibility of the start and navigation of the surrounds, and Alith Anar's position looks good by being a stone's throw away from Ultron, but as I assessed the geography, I found myself surprised that being on the front line is the least of his troubles, because you'll need to go north to defeat your initial enemy and get your first assassination contract complete. This is drawing you away when you really need to be going west and getting Marathi's capital and completing this first 4 settlement province, which is the Titan Peaks. This effectively slows Nagarythe's start by having 2 impending wars on different fronts, and to solve this I only go as far as Hag Hall, using this fortress as a great northern border and choke point to protect your mediocre starting province. And on that note, mediocre is a polite way to call this 2 settlement province with no unique buildings and a very exposed minor province. But once you do take the Titan Peaks from the Cult of Pleasure, this will feel far more like a true base for your empire. From here you can expand south and take Hexuatl's rich lands to provide a second 4 settlement province. If you'd like to play more defensively, going south first will provide you more economic backing and give you more time to confederate and really get yourself established. But if you want to play more adventurously, and this is also very popular, playing aggressively and going north means that there is a lot of post-battle loot and some amazing buildings up there once you snatch them from the Dark Elves. Venturing north to attack the Dark Elves also allows you to make maximum use of your underway ability, because most of the terrain around here is mountainous. This also means you can take away Malekith's ports and absolutely cripple him at the start of the game, and once you've taken away Malekith's ports, it's pretty much campaign over. So both methods are excellent. One is slow and steady, the other one is aggressive and effective. And now for Nagarythe's biggest flaw in terms of geography, which is climate. Almost all of Ulthuan has unpleasant climate, which means the general economic heart for most High Elf factions is not going to be anywhere near as fast in terms of growth or ultimately produce as much, which means that you have 2 choices. You either confederate early, which means you'll take longer to develop it, or you hold off confederations, foregoing this income but allowing them to develop it much quicker for you and get it to tier 4, where you can provide yourself more heroes. A safe method of play is to try and obtain the legendary lords and then leave the non-legendary factions to build themselves up to tier 4 or tier 5 and then confederate them when they're good for the picking. In terms of defensibility, it's still a very good position, but it's not as good as it used to be because Ulthuan is now much more likely to be at war with itself, so your once secure flank behind you still needs some work and investment to be able to keep it safe. That said, as long as you pick the right territories and try to manage your expansion, you have the potential to have a fantastic start backed with a good economy. For geography, Nagarythe gets 3 3/4 stars. Next we have the diplomacy rating, which rates how hostile the start is, offset by friendly opportunities to control those threats. If you've seen my basics mastery guide, you'll see one of my biggest lessons is don't go off exploring. A discovered faction is one that can declare war on you, and like an edgy teenager, Alith Anar throws this rule to the wind by having assassins wander the land and alert the entire world to your presence. This means enemies can quickly snowball, and I'll recommend now be careful when exploring the northwest corner and just consider keeping hidden if you haven't crossed any Dark Elves there yet if you need room to breathe. Otherwise go nuts, but sometimes you need some time to consolidate. To add to this, Alith Anar's a little bit abrasive and the other High Elves tend to be very lukewarm towards him, but fortunately, the relation bonuses and influence gained from the assassinations means you can achieve quick confederations. However, focusing on one lord generally means you need to ignore the rest due to your low funds to start with, so I highly recommend approaching Alariel and Eltharion and offering to join their wars in exchange for non-aggression. just to try and keep Ulthuan from snowballing into civil war. This is because Ulthuan is far less diplomatically stable than in older versions, but your assassinations really do help in getting the Confederations quickly. And this highlights why Nagarythe are so powerful, yet never really get brought up on people's overpowered lists because they have powerful duels to deal with difficult situations. And this is the reason why I don't recommend expanding up past Hackball until you are consolidated. Make sure you sign non-aggression with the Sisters of Twilight and they will offer it to you eventually. Even if they're like -45, they will offer it to you eventually because you have so many enemies in common, and they are a great ally to have because they will hold the territory with the climate that you don't want, and they will help you push back chaos when the time comes. And you'll find the Sisters of Twilight make excellent allies that don't tend to stir up too much trouble for you. If you do decide to venture south and take Hexawaddle's lands, not only are they rich, but it will also endear you to Marcus Wolfheart, allowing you to have positive diplomatic relations and create a border to the south. In terms of confederations, definitely opt for land that is closer to you so you can reinforce it. So ideally, if you would like to get Tyrion first, see my guide, by turn 10, Illyrian is actually your best bet. But otherwise, I would always opt for Caledor first because A, it's close, and B, this gives you eyes on Imric. This allows you to spend the next few turns bringing Imric up, which gives the other Ulthuan nations more time to use their superior growth to build up those provinces. Of course, try to get Tyrion whenever you can, but other than that, Alariel is fantastic, and try to hold off making contact with Evres. I will note here that most of the time I would recommend after confederating Imric, just hold his territory until it eventually falls to Skaven. Nagarythe though have the tools to deal with Imric's shortcomings, the ability to use the underway for yourself to avoid the crippling terrain that troubles Imric so badly is incredibly powerful. Couple this with the stalking stance and you have the tools to be able to put Snitch away and have another kingdom on the opposite end of the map. Again, this is advanced and I wouldn't recommend it for new players, but Nagarythe can do it better than any other lord. Despite having assassins that paint a giant bullseye on Alith Anar's head, he still has the tools thanks to the bonuses from these assassinations to deal with many of his diplomatic shortcomings. Next we have the military rating, which assesses the faction's ability to win and control military engagements. While the basic starting High Elf units are still strong until the mid game for your other lords, your starting lord does do most of your early lifting, and Alith Anar's access to discounted shadow units is incredibly strong to say the least. An army comprised primarily of these units can simply kite and shred most early armies without much difficulty, and Stalking Stance allows you to control your engagements, isolate early threats, and win most of your early battles with ease. Nagarythe's exclusive unit, the Shadow Walker, takes 2 turns to recruit, and in the busy world of Nagarythe it can be pretty difficult to sit still and achieve this, but I do recommend a couple of these in the front of your ranks because they deliver poison damage which slows the enemy, giving your units more time to kite away. So think of them more as a pseudo line holder if you want to make a full stack. If you want to make an entire stack of these guys, you absolutely can, but I tend to find only 4 Shadow Walkers and the rest Shadow Warriors after you've put in a couple of heroes will do very well. The only real flaw of these units is that they do lack armor piercing, so they will struggle later on, but their ability to kite and ambush will give them legs well past the mid game just purely because also Auto Resolve really loves ambushes. So make sure you prioritize the tier 1 research to increase movement by 5%, and follow this on with the tier 2 arrow and armor buffs which apply to the shadow units, which is actually quite rare for faction specific units. Additionally, adding a noble into your army will boost replenishment, but with the hone stat will also boost the shadow units melee stats, which is nice, but don't forget they're still just elves. On the battlefield himself, Alith Anar is an epic lord sniper, and while he is garbage in melee, he can summon a decoy which is excellent for distracting and clustering up enemy troops for your archers to wail on. As for personal quest items, Alith Anar gets 3. The Stone of Midnight is randomly generated after winning a battle and provides massive defensive buffs, while the Shadow Crown is gained by occupying the Shrine of Cain and increases ambush chance, but it's not essential and you shouldn't change your strategy just to get it, just confederate your way into it in due time. The Moonbow is his quest item, and that involves a combination of raiding, attacking Dark Elves, and it really does power up Alith Anar on the battlefield, not just in terms of stats. It gives him a nice area of effect blast arrow usable twice per battle. The battle itself is definitely not the easiest. I've demonstrated with a mixed army as usual, but I would definitely recommend at minimum 3 points in Bowmaster because you cannot run out of ammo in this fight. Immediately when the battle starts, break your army into 3 wings, keep your immobile units in the center, and then make sure you pincer the main army up ahead. You'll find reinforcements on the right flank, use your middle 2 forces to take them out, and then keep advancing because there will be one more lot of reinforcements behind where you started. So to make this easier, the more Shadow Warriors you have, the easier it will be. Alith Anar's discount to Shadow Warriors means that this is not an expensive army, and it just really outperforms what it costs you economically. Stalking Stance works with all other lords, and while this does sound epic, by the mid to late game you tend to be rocking multiple armies and then squashing things anyway, so it does kind of taper off a little bit, and also Nagarythe can't just automatically spawn armies out of thin air. That said, Nagarythe's various global recruitment buffs all stack together to help them pump out strong, high-level armies, all of which can use Stalking Stance to absolutely neuter army compositions that otherwise might challenge them, helping them scale well to the endgame and giving them a whopping 4 3/4 stars for military. Finally, we have the economic rating, which is the ability to generate wealth, cover costs, and expand your empire. Nagarythe enjoys a trade-focused high elf economy, but his starting province is garbage and it takes him several turns to get his hands on a united Titan peak, by which time Nagarythe has corrupted it. Expanding north to take some of the dark elf territory is risky but profitable, and going south to take Hexuatl is a very reliable way to get your hands on a second 4-tier province. If you manage to confederate Tyrion by turn 10, you now have 4 settlement provinces. But the one thing to remember is the climate suitability impacts growth and it impacts revenue as well as build times. It is going to take you a very long time to get Ulthuan firing to the same level that other high elves will have it. But with that said, you'll never be poor thanks to the discounted shadow army of Alith Anar. You'll be able to carry your military pretty much on the back of that single army, and soon you'll be in the driver's seat with no money problems to speak of. For economy, Nagarythe gets 4 1/4 stars. And finally, for the overall rating, Nagarythe's high strategy score and military rating really do go to show how powerful they are on paper. They are certainly a faction with all the tools they need to absolutely devastate the late game, and getting started is just a little bit slow due to the diplomatic and geographic situation they find themselves in. The fact so many of their strengths transfer onto the additional lords they acquire results in Alith Anar's faction being dynamic and powerful in both the early game and scaling right through to the end game. For this, he ends up with a very high 88% overall. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider giving the video a like and subscribe for new guides every single week. And if you'd like to have input on these videos, check out the Discord in the description below. This is Elven Plot Armor. Cheers for watching.